Hello, my name is Manuel Sanchez, and I am here to talk to you today about criminology and ponerology, the study of evil. It goes back to Andrew Blavatsky, talks into political ponerology, how evil becomes systematic and systemized in political systems, especially in totalitarian regimes. Pathocracy, 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 a system that favors people psychopathy, uh, a system that favors people with psychopathy to gain control of a society. Normal people are marginalized systematically, and society's values are inverted. This happened in Nazi Germany and Stalin, Russia, with the Bolsheviks. Andrew Blavatsky, he lived under both of those. Talks about ideological masks. Padocrats use prevailing ideologies as a facade to gain and to maintain power and to manipulate public perception and to suppress dissent. Concursive thinking phenomenon where individuals distort logical reasoning to align with emotionally driven, self-serving narratives, facilitating the rise of pantocratic leaders. So this is from Bishop Fulton Sheen. He says, quote, "We are at the end of Christendom, not Christianity. What is Christendom? Christendom is the economic, political, social life of a nation governed by the gospel ethic that is finished. That is finished, and the sooner that we recognize that, then the sooner that we can rebuild anew." He talks about three issues that are affecting the breakdown of Christendom. One is the defilement of the sacredness of life. All of us are created in God's image, from the lowliest of the low to the highest falutin people, and everyone in between. Even all human beings, no matter how they were born, genetic wise, with defects or not, they're all are they're we're all made in the image of God, and we are seeing a defilement to that with abortion. There are, since 1973 till now in 2025, there have been over 3.8 billion recorded abortions. That amounts to about 73 million per year, and God knows only how many other abortions there have been that are not recorded. A breakdown in the sanctity of marriage. Marriage is a sign and symbol of God's covenant with humanity, especially the reflection of Christ and the church. Christ being the man and the church being the woman. That is how a man is supposed to operate for the woman. He's supposed to give himself for his beloved. Three, we are seeing a breakdown in the belief in God, and people believe that God is dead, a belief that leads to nihilism. And in 2025, with the with Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner in Freakonomics, they try to assert that abortion was actually bringing crime down and everything like that. But that has been absolutely debunked. And Hannah Arendt, Aredt, Hannah Arendt, she talks about totalitarianism and the rise of totalitarianism. She starts off by talking about the history of government outside of the biblical worldview, of course. We know that that Adam and Eve walked with Yahweh, that he spoke the Torah, the instructions to them about the basics of life and everything like that. So they had an idea of the tithe, they had an idea of sacrifice, of clean, tahor, tamim, and what's clean and unclean. They had an idea of that because they literally walked with Yahweh for generations. And many of people like Enoch walked with Yahweh for generations. So outside of that, we've had different forms of government. We have a government by the brave, which is called a democracy. We've had government by the best, or aristocracy, aristocrat. I can't say that properly. Aristocracy, then autocracy, the oligarchy, a government by the rich, a government by the people, the democracy, and tyranny, a government by one. In the United States of America, we have had a hybrid. We have a hybrid model. It's split between a constitutional republic, a democracy, and an oligarchy. It's kind of like all three combined. It's supposed to be only a constitutional republic, but people always refer to it as a democracy. But really, it's all oligarchy also. Totalitarianism was conceived and carried out by humans in the 20th century. This was under Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia, the Bolsheviks. Three things lead rise to totalitarianism. Totalitarianism erases class by seeing everyone belonging to the masses. So there's no middle class. There's only rich and poor. There's none of that. There's just you're either slaved you're the slave master or you're the slave. Then two, totalitarianism shifts power from military to police. Three, totalitarianism seeks to align its efforts to a supreme, unavoidable law. So, with the Nazis, they had the law of nature. They saw themselves as the most superior, dominant race on the planet. So that's how they saw it. It was by the law of nature that I'm conquering. The Bolsheviks, they had history, capital history behind them. They were going into the whole back to the Caesar and to Rome and to their claims. All governments suffer a reoccurring problem. Power attributes pathological pers- Power attracts pathological personalities. Seduced by the already Power seduces the already culpable. And then political ponerology, we talked about that by Andrew Labaczeski. And then Robert Hare, he's a psychopathy researcher. They talk about how once a psychopath is gains power, once authority is gained, he only needs 6 to 12% of support because the rest of the people are going to either shut up and just fall in place and do what's told, or they're going to just get out of the way. And that the Milgram experiment proves that, and COVID-19 proved that also. So psychopaths are social chameleons. They utilize doublespeak. They weaponize morality. They use tools of control and repression. And they have a mask of sanity that they appear to put on. They put on this facade that they are normal, rational human beings when they have devious agendas behind them, and they are willing to exploit. Ideology that totalitarian regimes can only prevail if the masses are able to accept a grand narrative transcending a face value understanding of reality. So there's a lot of narratives that are building now in the United States. Ideological thinking becomes emancipated from the reality, and we perceive with the reality that we perceive with our five senses, and insist on a truer reality concealed behind all concealed behind all perceptible things. So the ideological thinking becomes more common when the lines between fact and fiction get blurred, when truth becomes more suggestive than objective in a society. So that's exactly where we're at in society now. We are literally, what is your truth? Tell me your truth. Explain your truth. Loneliness in the political sphere amounts to loneliness in the social sphere, like council culture. Cancellation alienated them for breaking the certain codes, and the consequences for breaking those codes are a fear of further association with them, or rubbing off and or having facing a similar fate on you. So what do? You break ties with them. Look at what happened in COVID. How did you react during COVID? Banishment on political fronts is banishment on social fronts. Loneliness and solitude are not the same. Read Sirio from De Republica, and then from Epictetus, Discords of Epictetus. One is not in company merely by being among company, and just because one is alone does not mean that he is in solitude, but instead together with himself. Loneliness is a devastating reality. It leads many to mental instability and even suicide. However, solitude can be highly productive, and it is highly productive. And that's exactly the state of mind that they want you to be away from. That's why they're bombarding you with entertainment, pornography, all kinds of stuff, movies, all kinds of other stuff, anything but solitude. Work, totalitarianism cannot thrive unless the classes turn into masses. Consequences of mindlessly accepting an ideology, a narrative with little or no resistance. So avoiding, in order to get people to mindlessly adopt an ideology or narrative, is to make sure that they are lonely. To achieve this, they must make sure everybody avoids solitude. So that is the goal. The goal is to get you away from solitude, from creative thinking, for being your own person, and to being your own thing, into um, being in a constant state of anomie. So they double down by that by breaking ties between us, by making us isolated and lonely. Structured anomie. What is anomie? Anomie is a state of normlessness. It is a breakdown of societal norms that leaves individuals feeling disconnected and purposeless. Many American cities are facing significant economic inequalities and facing anomie, fragmented family structures, drug abuse, community disintegration. These are classic signs of anomie conditions, where traditional values and moral codes no longer guide behavior, especially among the youth. The Hershey social bond theory: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Attachment to the parents, the attachment to the church, the attachment to the school, attachment to elders is severed by adverse childhood experiences, neglect, broken families, and commitments. So that's exactly what's happening right now. People are coming from different broken homes, single family institutions. The institution of family is being destroyed. Nobody's getting married. Most people are not either. They have homosexual relationships. Now they have different things like that. There's isolation from the church. Most people were born Catholic, but most people are not going into the church anymore. If they leave, they go into Protestant Christianity, and if not, they actually just leave everything all behind, and they just take off and they just become an atheist or secular. And the elder generation is severed because a lot of this stuff is adverse childhood experiences. So rape, molestation, all this stuff is happening, and this stuff is becoming a cycle. So it's severing the attachment to your parents, your church, your school. There is school attachment now. School is probably the one attachment that kids cling to the most, if anything, because that's become a more what is it? It's a business model to extract money from you somehow, some way. But that's their stronger. But school could be an outlet for attachment. So, but if you're not attached to that, you're more correlated to commit crime. Commitment to future goals is voided by economic despair and nihilism, a lack of opportunities. A lack of involvement in positive social structures is replaced with gangs, street culture, and zoning out, disassociation, like mindlessly scrolling, wanting to, get away from the pain. So you're just kind of like different association and stuff like that. Virtual realities, games, books, sex, all that stuff. So, and then belief in God, law, truth is seen as weak or outdated. So Christianity is seen as ancient, or that's for them, or we don't believe in that stuff. We don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster and all this stuff. That ties into. So this is a study from Arthur Schopenhauer. Reality is driven by a blind, irrational force he calls the will. He believes human suffering is inherent because desire and striveless are endless, and that peace comes only through art and renunciation of the will. the force, the force that compels individuals to strive, compete, and to dominate, often without regard for morality. Power is obtained through ruthless ambition, deception, and aggression. Those who lack ethical restraints tend to rise more easily in hierarchies because of a lack of moral constraints, are willing to lie, manipulate, and exploit others, and operating off of fear and submission, which is an illusion of strength. Uh, and many people mistake ruthlessness for competence and leadership. So this now we're going to talk into about how they're doing that, how they're isolating everybody, how they're getting everybody to isolate so that way they can form into these ideologies. Robert Putnam, Social Capital. The idea that relationships, networks, and community engagement create value in society. Social capital has been declining in the U.S. since the mid 20th century from bowling alone. He's talking about how people at once used to have bowling leagues, but now people are like actually bowling in more isolated ways, and he doesn't isolate that to just bowling. He talks about how people are not joining leagues People are increasingly isolated, participating less in civic groups, churches, unions, and even informal social gatherings. So that was way before COVID. So they capitalized on that, on COVID, and they brought in all these draconian measures, and they put everybody in a constant state of fear, fight or flight, and they're still in that. Causes of decline: technology and individualism, TV, internet, social media, pornography, uh, community and suburbanization, longer work hours, inflation, um, no longer reduced time for community participation, a declining of traditional institutions, generational changes, and social clemency, value people gain from their social networks. Ties into Edward Bernays. This was how he tied in all the propaganda and social relations into the media, the news, the TV, and everything like that. All the subliminal messaging. Edward Bernays, he's the godfather of consumerism and materialism. This is why everyone has a, and it's already subconscious for people to just buy stuff, buy, like the engineering of consent. He was related to Sigmund Freud. His goal was to make all of society docile, distracted, and all consuming of self. They wanted them to be consumed with self. That's why we have such a huge plague of narcissism happening in society right now, is because of this guy and Sigmund Freud, who was a pedophile. These guys were pedophiles and all this stuff. Make the population distracted by consumerism, entertainment, and Hinduism, which will lead to docile society. The masses are driven by factors outside of their conscious understanding, and therefore their minds can and should be manipulated by the capable few. This is what he believed, Bernays. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of society. So propaganda and public relations. If you ever heard this, Edward Bernays literally coined these. The standard marketing approach in the modern age is to appeal to the target's market deepest desires and to make them feel like they want or even need the service or product that is offered. Our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, and our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. It is they who pull the strings that control the public's mind, the engineering of consent. Edward Bernays worked for General Electric. He worked for Procter and Gamble, the American Tobacco Company. He worked for CBS, President Calvin Coolidge, 1924 election, 1924 Easter Parade, Torches of Freedom. Those are cigarettes that women were holding up for freedom. He, the Lucky Strike cigarettes. He had the propaganda saying that they would swim the waistlines for women, and that they would be smooth on the throat and not harsh like the male cigarettes. He said that Dixie cups. He worked for Dixie cups. The only ones that were sanitary, like something like this. Like he was like, "These aren't Dixie cups, but now they're hefty." But like, but you know what I mean. The only ones that were sanitary, so he used that. His work got all the way to the Third Reich in 1920 by Joseph Goebbels for the Führer cult. His work was used in Nazi propaganda. The Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter warned President Franklin Roosevelt against allowing Bernays to play a leadership role in World War II, describing him and his colleagues as professional poisoners of the public mind. So that ties into the psychopathy, how all those adverse childhood experiences lead to the different factor one, psychopathy, sociopath, or psychopath, and then the type two, factor two, sociopath. And then it ties into the abortion pill. The abortion pill was made by the same people that made Zyklon B. Zyklon B was used for poison of the Jews in the Holocaust. Russell Ukloff, RU TAC 486 abortion pill. It was made by Zyklon B, the people that made Zyklon B. So private control, let's talk about private control. This is how privatizations of corporations of public services are happening in the United States. It's actually infringing on our freedoms. So once a public service is privatized, the public loses any oversight and how it is run. An example is Maximus Inc. It was a company that was paid with public money to provide public services. But once it became incorporated, Maximus Inc. hid all the basic information from the public, and it literally was like, "That's it. That's the way it goes." So how can you fight back? You can recognize the playbook. If anyone, political politicians are speaking of efficiency or choice, you got to ask who profits. There's the prison industrial complex. There is the pharmaceutical industrial complex. There's the education industrial complex. There's all kinds of different stuff that they're literally taking money away from us somehow, some way. Pressure your local officials, demand transparency, expose corporate deals. Three, support public opinions, public options. Whoever controls the infrastructure controls the future. Inequality is engineered and policy. Privatization relies on our complacency. Inequality is engineered. It's run by bottom of the period, bottom of the pyramid marketing. It's an anti-intellectualism in the United States for privatization. It's keeping working people from getting the tools, the knowledge, and the power to challenge the systems, keeping you enslaved in debt and being robbed generation after generation, such as like the present industrial complex, private prisons, quotas, tribal mass incarceration. The United States has 25% of the of our population in prison, highest numbers on record. It's insane, uh, and it deters reform. So their business models is really, if we have reform and if we have actual recidivism in the United States, they will lose money, and that's their business model. Is they are like, no, we got to make sure that people stay in jail and that they are um, doing crime, so that way they could fill up those prison models. Private probation. In Greenwood, Mississippi, 10% of the population ended up on probation 6 months after a corporation took over the public service, um, and just by traffic violations and tickets. The Judicial Correction Services LLC was pocketing over $50,000 a month in corporate from that money. Judges had financial ties to those financial private firms. There's people being extra. They're extracting profit from ankle monitors. They're getting kickbacks. Then once immigration started happening, with immigration detention, the SB 1070 of Arizona, the Corrections Corporation of America, and ALEC started going up. All the private detentions in 2017, 75% of immigrants were in private holding. Now 90% are in privatized holding. So these are just some of the aspects that are important that we need to think about, and I pray that we're able to learn and to grow. So Yahweh bless. Shalom, shalom.